Namaste. Very warm welcome to Victoria Memorial Hall. And on behalf of the organization, we wish you all a very, very, very happy new year. We hope that all of you are safe and healthy in the year that awaits us. Today, we are all gathered for a special lecture by none other than Dr. Banerjee. He'll be talking on the topic Narrating the Nation Through Paintings, Abanindranath Tagore's Nationalism. We'll be having the lecture by him first, and then he will be taking us on a guided walkthrough at the museum where the series Arabian Nights by Abanindranath is displayed. So let us welcome Dr. Banerjee here. I request our Secretary and Curator, Sri Samarendra Kumarji, to please felicitate Dr. Banerjee. Thank you so much, sir. Just a brief introduction to our speaker today. Dr. Debashish Banerjee is a Haridas Chaudhary Professor of Indian Philosophies and Cultures and the Doshi Professor of Asian Art at California Institute of Integral Studies, San Francisco. He has authored and edited several books on the figures of the Bengal Renaissance, critical posthumanism, integral yoga psychology, and on several creative and art illustrated projects, and has written and produced the documentary film Darshan, The Living Art of India in 2018. He is the great-grandson of Abanindranath Tagore, and his book on the artist is considered a landmark theoretical intervention. His latest published monograph is Time Steps in the Cosmic Horse, the contemplative philosophy of the great forest, the Brihadanayaka Upanishad. A monograph on the theoretical approach to Indian art, visual imagination of Indian history, theory, and method is also now in press. I hand it over to you, sir. Let's begin the lecture.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really a pleasure, an honor to be here at the Victoria Memorial and give you this talk. It's a wonderful exhibition. I just went through it. It's a very rare opportunity to get to see these paintings. And I'm surprised that more people don't know about it. But it was really fantastic to see the exhibition. So today's talk is Narrating the Nation Through Paintings, Abanindranath Tagore's Nationalism. So this is what my talk is about. So interestingly, this painting is also displayed in the gallery, a very famous painting, Bharat Mata. And so we begin with this when we are talking about Abanindranath Tagore's nationalism. As most of you know, this is the initiation of the political movement for freedom of India. It begins with the partition of Bengal in 1905, 20th July 1905. And of course, this is preluded by a very long period of cultural nationalism in Bengal. So 20th July 1905, there is the partition of Bengal. And interestingly, the very same year, very shortly after, Abanindranath was made vice principal of the Government College of Arts and Crafts by the then principal E.B. Havell, interestingly on 15th August 1905, in a prescient way, kind of on the same day that we would get our independence. The painting that he made, he called it Bongo Mata. Of course, you can see because it's related to the partition of Bengal. And of course, also when we are talking about the prelude to this, there's a lot of writing. There is Ananda Mott, the whole idea of the nation as a mother. Also, we have songs, like Amar Janmabhoomi by D.L. Roy, that feed into this painting. And we'll see some of the ways in which that happens. The painting was reproduced in banners for anti-partition rallies, and it was renamed as Bharat Mata by Sister Nivedita, who wrote a long article about it, introducing it in Probashi in 1906, the next year, and where in Probashi they captioned it as Matri Murti. This is a quote from Sister Nivedita. She called it the first masterpiece in which an Indian artist has actually succeeded in disengaging, as it were, the spirit of motherland, unquote. Now, what are the precedents of this image? Just in passing, it's good to note Abanindranath had already started entering into an understanding of the traditions of Indian art. He had encountered Havel, he was looking at Indian paintings, and this painting is the closest traditional painting that comes to it is Vasundhara, which is a Buddhist painting. As you can see, this is what you're looking at is a more modern rendition, because Vasundhara as a painting is not seen so often, and usually when it's seen as a sculpture, and the more common form of Vasundhara is seated, she's sitting. But there are standing figures. And this is a Newari painting, the one that's coupled with Bharat Mata, a modern Nepali Newari painting. And Newari painting is a genre of its own, where they are doing the painting in a kind of naturalistic way. So there's a three-dimensionality to the painting which you wouldn't see in traditional paintings. So the iconographic model, this is the iconographic model. It is based on the Buddhist goddess Vasundhara, consort of Jambhala, and goddess of fertility and prosperity. The attributes given to Bango Mata, Bharat Mata, as you can see, they are related to Swadeshi. This is the beginning of the Swadeshi movement. They are related to Swadeshi, and they carry the promise of material and spiritual life, both material and spiritual life. Anna, which is the paddy that she's holding, Vastra, the cloth, these become some of the symbols of Swadeshi, producing your own cloth. Siksha, national education, which is figured by that manuscript that she's holding, and Diksha, which is the Japamala. Now you see a lot of these in the hands of Vasundhara. You can see the manuscript, you can see the paddy, sheaf of paddy, you can see the mala, but she has some other emblems as well. She has, that little thing on the right over here. What you see over here is the three ratna, the Buddhist three jewels. And what you see here is a pot of jewels, because she is a goddess of prosperity. She's a goddess of wealth. Abanindranath is deliberately deviating at this point as far as that is concerned, and you can see that Bharat Mata or Bango Mata is a renunciant. She is not a goddess of wealth. She is a goddess who has renounced all her worldly belongings. At the same time, she's offering these boons to those who take that particular path. So it deviates from Vasundhara in replacing the pot of treasures and the Buddhist three ratna with a piece of cloth, vastra. It's a renunciant image instead of an opulent one, in keeping with the need for concentrated austerity during the freedom struggle. So as you see, if you read Anandamot, there are three images of the goddess, and the image for the present there is not this kind of renunciant, it's really Kali. It's Kali because in a way she's emaciated, and she's also exhorting the nation to come to become active. And images of Kali would also be produced by people like Nandalal. Nandalal has produced images of Kali during this period. A little while later, Abanindranath himself, in his Raj Kahini, when he's talking about Padmini, he brings up the image of Kali in a similar kind of way as in Anandamot, but she there is calling these women to Johar. mass suicide. While here, he's trying to point out that, this kind of austere renunciation is an internal praxis needed to cope with the times, not to, go into the violent path. Of course, at this time, there were different modalities in the freedom struggle. The face and figure are human, so unlike the kind of notion of a goddess, he's humanizing the goddess. And some people say that it is based on his eldest daughter, Uma Devi. And some people have also written that it is based on Sister Nivedita. So he doesn't talk about exactly who it's based on, but it's definitely humanized. And then by this time, he has encountered Japanese paintings. And so the wash that you see there creates an impression of an emergence from an ideal world. So you see, the way he does the wash, I'm not going to go into detail on his wash method, but it's different from the Japanese wash, the wash of the Nihonga artists. And the way he's doing it is deliberately to create these gradations where there is an emergence taking place from something behind. And so that's what we're seeing over here. Now this image, this event, phenomenon is the initiation of the freedom struggle for India. And it's encouraged Abanindranath himself, the Bengal school, the government art college with Havel as its principal, are all very opportunely situated at this point for this period, for the freedom struggle. And they encourage this artistic activity. So it is encouraged by Indophiles such as Havel and Sister Nivedita. Each one of them, of course, have their own reasons for this. They're not necessarily the same as the reasons for the freedom fighters. But at the same time, there is for Nivedita, for example, there is a distinct call for Indian freedom. She's involved with the revolutionaries. For Havel, also, he has a revisionary understanding of Western art. He sees that the Indian tradition has a lot to give, is superior in some ways, because there's a lot of evaluation going on at that time in terms of art history and the creation of a world canon, what stays at the center and what stays at the periphery. So Havel is involved in a revisionary art history. So they encourage this kind of production of art by Abanindranath. Now, with this at this moment, it is good to take a step back and understand what is happening in terms of what is a nation and why this is so significant at this point in time. So the modern nation, which is being born, is a modern idea. And the idea of the modern nation as a place for collective identity in a world that is divided into different places for collective identity, different nations, is what is at stake here. So if we are to arise as a nation, as a new, what kind of a nation will we be? What kind of a imagined community, to use Benedict Anderson's term, are we trying to emerge as? What is the nature of that identity that we are trying to build? So that question becomes very important. When Abanindranath is painting this particular image with the forces around him, including people like Havel, Sister Nivedita, the revolutionaries, other people who are trying to articulate what is the nature of collective identity in India. So the place of art in that kind of an enterprise is very important. So this is nationalist art. Art that will portray what is the nature of the identity of that, of that people. So the place of art in nationalism is to inspire a connection to the nation as an idea. You see, what is the idea that, and how does art inspire that belongingness to that idea? An identity based on an origin, a history, and a telos or goal. These are the features that constitute the notion of an identity. What is the origin from which we came? What is the narration? How are we telling the story about our origin? What is the nature of the history? Because histories based on a certain identity have inclusions and exclusions. If I have a certain origin and I have a certain path in which that origin is propagating, I will tell my story in such a way that I highlight certain type of events and I suppress certain types of events. And this is related to a goal, the goal of the emergence of the nation, the telos. So this kind of an idea, this is one of the, that's why I said we are taking a step back. This is the problematic of a nation in the modern world. The problematic of a nation in the modern world is it immediately launches into a world of contested histories. There are going to be many ways in which we look at this particular identity in terms of origin, history, and telos. Many people will want to say different things about that. Now, Havel, Nivedita, Kumaraswamy, and the founders of Indian art history. Note that this moment is not only the founding of India as a nation, but it's also the founding of Indian art history that is taking place. There is a stake in making art into the vehicle for that story that will talk about the trajectory of what is India and what is Indian history. So they are the founders, and in a way it's interesting to note that they are not Indians. They're all outsiders, they're Western people, but they're not the stereotypical Western. They're not the kind of Western that is interested in a colonizer's history. They are interested in a revisionary history. So there is a certain kind of a give and take going on, a kind of a relationship with a rising nation, but also a kind of providing of certain images that are not yet developed in the nation itself. It's feeding ideas into the history of the nation. So these people are invested in an idea of India based on a history of art. And the history of art places its classical high point in the Gupta period, okay? And seeing its telos as a return to that ideal. So they're seeing that India, the glory of India, lies in an origin point during the Gupta period when the classical idiom was produced. And in a way, this is what Havel did. He started the government, he became the principal of the government art college. And one of the first things he did is he threw out the plaster cast sculptures of classical European art and replaced them with Indian models. And also, you see, because the government, the Indian Museum was connected. The Indian Museum and the Government Art College were one. They were one thing. So the buying of new objects into the museum so that they could actually support the learning of new art. It's interesting to see this is to some extent still being carried on. If you go to the museum, you see people sitting down there. They're the students of the Government Art College sitting down on the floor and making copies. So this protha was started by Havel, okay? Now, they're seeing this as the trajectory, that we have to go back to the classical idea of India in the Gupta period and make that into the archetype, the origin point of telling the history of India. Now, so, as most of you know, Nivedita encouraged Abanindranath to take his students and join Christiana Herringham in her studies of Ajanta in 1911. So this is also still during the Swadeshi period. There's a British copyist, Herringham, who comes to India, and they're all part of something called the India Society in Britain that is started by Havel after going back. And they're promoting Indian art. and they think that they have to come to India, to Ajanta, which is really the high point of the Gupta art for them. And the paintings, of course, there's no examples like that left. It's the only place where you get examples of paintings going back to that period. So Herringham was going to come to copy those paintings, and Nivedita asked Abanindranath to take his students and join her to do those paintings. Abanindranath does not himself go, but he was persuaded to send some of his students to join Herringham. So they go there and do copies of these paintings. Now, Kumaraswamy, who also comes shortly after this period to India, adulates Abanindranath and his students, but later criticized them for not being Indian enough. So you see, this is the whole stake that is going on, that these people, they feel from the beginning, Havel thinks he's found a champion in Abanindranath to his ideas about India, its history, and the entire trajectory of the nation, writing history of the nation through painting. And Abanindranath and his school start producing a certain kind of an art that is immediately seen as national painting. But there's a little element of disappointment by these people who are promoting it. They're thinking that it's not Indian enough. There's something here that they're not putting their heart and soul into the narrative that they're trying to promote, that going back to Ajanta and trying to create a new version, which actually would have been called revivalism. And in fact, that's the label that is given by later art, painters and art movements in India to Abanindranath and his movement. But on the other hand, the people who were encouraging him thought they were not really Indian enough. Now, what was Abanindranath's attitude towards this? We see a very clear idea of that in an early period work that he produced in 1914 called Notes on Indian Artistic Anatomy. Okay? And in the book, it's still available. I mean, there are new reprints that have come out of this book. If you look at it, you'll see that he starts by thanking the traditional sculptor, Sthapati, from Kumbakonam, whose name is Guru Swami, and his students, Venkatappa and Nandalal, who have done the illustrations. And then he starts explaining why he is doing this work and how people should look at it. He says, "Let me also make this little request of my readers, and especially of my friends and pupils, my fellow pilgrims in the quest for that realization, which is the fulfillment of all art, that they may not take these aesthetic canons and form analysis of our art treatises with all the rigors of their standards and their demonstrations as representing absolute and inviolable laws, nor deprive their art endeavors of the sustaining breath of freedom by confining themselves and their works within the limits of Shastric demonstrations. Till we find the strength to fly, we cling to our nest and its confines. But even while within our bounds, we have to struggle for the strength to outstep them. For let us not forget that it is the artist and his creations that come first, and then the lawgiver and his codes of art. Art is not for the justification of the Shilpa Shastra, but the Shastra is for the elucidation of art. It is the concrete form which is evolved first, and then come its analysis and its commentaries, its standards and its proportions, codified in the form of Shastras." Unquote. So what was Abanindranath's idea of what his students should produce? And these ideas, of course, are not only his, they belong to a number of people. We see this in the writings of Okakura, who came and had a very strong influence on Abanindranath. We see it in the writings of people like James Cousins, So this is a certain kind of looking at a relationship with the past, because we are at the turn of the century and modernism is coming in. The idea of how should we relate to the past? When we talk about the modern, when we talk about the modern as an age, the modern age has a certain kind of need within itself to outstep its past all the time. We are looking for novelty all the time, as if the past doesn't exist. The more we can forget it, the more modern we become somehow. But what these people were saying is that we should not do that, nor should we go back and become people of the past or copy the past. Abanindranath recommended building a relationship with tradition and nature. So these are the two pillars. Build a deep relationship with tradition and build a relationship with nature, but subject them to personal interpretation in our time and place. So this is how he wanted to propose his kind of relationship to history, to the past. Now, what was his nationalism? For that, we have to go further back, and we have to go back to his point of departure, where Abanindranath, who was training to become a Western-style artist, learning from teachers like Olinto Gilhardi. I'm told there was an exhibition of Italian paintings around this time in Kolkata. And, Gilhardi was one of the painters who was settled here. And there were British painters, watercolor painters that he was learning from, Charles Palmer. So he becomes dissatisfied with the kind of learning of Western academic art. And at that point, Rabindranath, he expresses his dissatisfaction to his uncle, and Rabindranath says, why don't you look at our Vaishnav traditions? Because he himself did that. He began his own production by looking at Padaboli poems and songs and wrote his Bhanushinger Padaboli. That's his point of departure. So his advice is taken up by Abanindranath, who does his first series of paintings in a new style, which are called the Krishna Lila paintings. So these are done in 1896-97. There are 23 paintings depicting episodes related to Krishna's dalliances with the gopis and Radha. And it's a theme, it's repeating the theme from miniatures of Rajasthan and Pahari painting. But you have to see that in doing so, he is coding them with new meanings. And this is the thing that needs to be, if you don't see that, then we put it in the area of revivalism. He's copying the past, but he's doing something which is new. He's putting new meanings into it. Now, what was his connection with this entire production? The Tagores were Vaishnavas originally, but they had been outcast from Hindu society. So they were and are popularly known as Pir Ali Brahmins. And the Pir Ali comes from the fact that some ancestors became Muslims in the 15th century. And so they were outcast as a result. And in the 17th century, they leave Joshore and come into Kolkata, which is a new city where they can be unmarked because it's a city that is, coded by the modern. You see that there's a different kind of convention that is beginning to grow over here. So the paintings operate on several registers at once. See, this is one thing which one has to realize, this business about the Pir Ali Brahmin. Abanindranath is marked by this hybrid history of India. And he accepts that hybrid history. You see, it isn't that the Muslims have done him bad. It's also the Hindus that have done him bad because he has been outcast. And he feels that he's, in some sense, still a Vaishnav. Because though outcast, they are continuing their Vaishnav practices. But on the other hand, he feels that in some subconscious way, he's also part of the history of Islamic India. You cannot pull out, extricate the Islamic from the history of the nation. So this is something that works into his nationalism, and we'll see how that happens. So these paintings operate on several registers at once. Now this is one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, now in the modern world, what is a painting? A painting is a display object. You go here, there's a gallery, you stand there and look at the painting. And as a display object, it's something that is, subjected to your gaze. See, it isn't an intimate object. It's not an object of intimate relationship. And then it immediately enters into the circuits, the commercial circuits of buying, selling, collecting, possessing. So it becomes a different kind of relationship. Salons, competitions, you have art criticism, which is really to a large extent, a kind of grading of art. This is better, that is worse, etc. Related to value that you're going to put on it so that somebody will pay more for this and less for that. So that is an entire world of modern art. And he is participating in that world. He realizes that as a modern artist, he participates in that world. But he's also participating in a pre-modern world where art belonged to community, where artistic objects were moved from hand to hand in intimate circles of appreciation and conversation. See? So when we look at this need to change into a new kind of art is also a move to the miniature. That's why many people wonder, why did he move to the miniature? And again, as I said, coding these returns with new meanings. So a grand uncle of mine, one of his grandsons, his youngest grandson, I asked him this question. This is Abanindranath Tagore, who is no longer alive, that what he thought was the reason that Abanindranath went to the miniature. And he said, well, he told me himself that he used the Bengali term, these are koler shishu. Koler shishu means children of the lap, which is immediately a reference to a different practice, a different culture of art relating to art. You see, art moves from lap to lap. People look at it, people talk about it, etc. So this art is operating on two registers. Both, it's a miniature which is going to hang up on walls, go into competition salons, art journals are going to write about it, etc. But at the same time, it also belongs to the intimate domestic domain, you see. So they move between the domains of the salon and the home, modern aesthetic objects for display and for private enjoyment, koler shishu. Now, the other aspect of it is the way the painting is divided. Each painting occupies only half the picture surface, the other half being made up of calligraphy, featuring a title and the text being illustrated. As you can see, it's only a little part of it that is the painting, and a big part of it is the writing. The paintings are done in watercolor in a style which is a hybrid between Rajput paintings and European medieval illuminations. And this itself also is related to the fact that in his own telling, he says that before he started these paintings, he came across a book of medieval illustrations or illuminations that came to him from England. And at the same time, his relatives were writing in Bharati, etc. Abanindranath Tagore was writing about various paintings from Patna or Delhi, etc. And he was influenced by both these schools in producing this work. And so there's this hybridity. even in the way in which he does the figures, there is that hybridity that is already part Rajput, part British, you may say. The calligraphy, now I just want to draw your attention to the title over here and what's happening briefly. This is Okrur Shangbad. And I'll say a few words about the calligraphy later, but it's all in Bengali. It looks like Nastalik Urdu, but this is actually Bengali. And Okrur Shangbad Okrur is coming to tell the gopis in Vrindavan that Krishna is going to Mathura. That's what and you can see through the door the chariot, which is a little hint at the fact that he's going to go away. And you can see that the gopis are swooning in, sadness, that excess of emotion that is characteristic of Vaishnava poetry. Now here on top it says, no Bihar. That's what it says over here. Now the calligraphy is done in an invented Nastaliq Urdu or Persian style, evoking a history of Islamic culture. So there's this layer that cannot be erased or forgotten. This layer exists. You see, the titles are taken, those titles that I just mentioned, they're taken from the repertory of Pala Kirtan, bringing the world of Vaishnav performative mysticism to mind. These titles, why these specific titles? At that time, there were lots of books of Pala Kirtan. But the Pala Kirtans were divided or classified according to the kind of Pala. And these were specific names. They are codes to the kind of Palas that are, the classification. So he is referring distinctly to those codes and telling us that, immediately bringing to mind the entire practice of Pala Kirtan. The body of the text is taken from a variety of Padavali texts. When I started my research on this, most of the people who had written on it were classifying it as Joydev's Geet Gobindo. But when I looked, they hadn't been reading it. If you look at it closely, they come from a variety of sources. They actually feature an entire history of Padavali writing. And some of it is in Sanskrit and some of it is in Brajabuli, Old Bengali. So the body is taken from a variety of Padavali texts ranging from Joydev's Geet Gobindo, 12th century Sanskrit, to post-Chaitanya poets of Old Bengali, Brajabuli. This one, for example, is in Sanskrit. This is from Joydev. This No Bihar is from Joydev. But this one here, this one is in Sanskrit. This is Joydev. While this one is a poem called, Gandash. Gandash is a 16th century post-Chaitanya poet. So it's from his work. Now, seeing when you're confronted with this and you know all these things that are going on, if it's an informed appreciation of the work, if it's really a Kole Shishu, where you are taking your time to relate to it, and reading the text, one is confronted with an entire cultural history, ranging from the classical Sanskritic period through the history of Bengali Vaishnavism, the interchange with Islamic Sufi mysticism, into the present of modern Bengali Pala Kirtan, and of international Orientalism, where it jumps the lap and gets onto the wall, you see, gets onto the circuits of international art. This deceptive multivocality is present behind the nation in the making. So this is partly how I see Abanindranath's narration of the nation, and you can see that in most of his, and that's the thesis of this presentation, you can see that in most of his work, that as he looks at India of his time, Kolkata of his time, This is the deceptive multivocality that lies behind the surface. And it calls us to acknowledge it and internalize its potentials for the creative performances of nation making. Why creative performances of nation making? That I will draw on as we go into this talk. Now he's moving on in this is still the Swadeshi period, around 1910. Abanindranath took a commission from a British publisher. He's already become quite well known, partly because of the India Society in Britain and Havel's patronage and the group that is collecting in Britain. And exhibitions are beginning to take place. So I think the first exhibition abroad takes place around 1914. So, but his work is, printed work is being circulated, etc. So he is commissioned to do a series of paintings for Edward Fitzgerald's translation of Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat. So he does 12 paintings during this period. These were published both in a book form with text, with Fitzgerald's text, and independently as a portfolio. Though, a lot of writing, there's tremendous number of people who have illustrated the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And this is so because it became an Orientalist favorite. And an Orientalist favorite because, Edward Said will talk a lot about this, that it becomes exactly the kind of hedonistic work that appeals to the Orientalistic imagination as stereotyping the Eastern, you see. So these are the kind of people, and it's a sort of a decadent, end-of-century nostalgia that people feel, that they feel that they are getting a certain kind of satisfaction through works like the Rubaiyat. So it is now believed, people have written a lot about it, and the question of, is this a mystical text or is this a hedonistic text? The judgment today falls on the side of a hedonistic text. Believed to celebrate hedonism, Abanindranath and his uncle, Rabindranath, were then also reading another Rubaiyat by the Persian mystic Hafiz. So both of them actually talk about it as well. Abanindranath has an article about this Hafiz's Rubaiyat. So when he's doing his illustrations, that's also in his mind, and he's giving it a certain treatment. And if the Krishna Leela paintings are more properly illustrations, these paintings deviate significantly from illustrations. Many of them have nothing to do with the quatrain that is written. He's producing something which is completely his own. So Abanindranath's illustrations deviate significantly from the translated text to see Rubaiyat as a mystical text set in Bengal and an imaginary pan-Asian world. So this is, from this point, the notion of this pan-Asianism, which Okakura had brought with him in 1902, really settles for Abanindranath. India for him is part of a pan-Asian world. And so is any country in that world. For example, Persia or China or Japan. So his paintings belong to a virtual space where they all mingle with each other. And so you can see that over here in this Rubaiyat, all his female figures wear saris. And some of them have feet adorned with alta. Like here you can see the red feet, which belongs to the Bengali Muslim, see? A Bengali practice, all Bengali women. But I think because this is a text that is coming from Persia, he codes this as a Bengali Muslim text. And the men wear an interesting kind of jabba, as you can see over here, which is partly Persian, but partly an invented dress that he himself and his uncle were wearing. As you can see, the men wear Persian jubbas, and this dress was actually designed by Gaganendranath. Similar to the dress Abanindranath's elder brother Gaganendranath designed for the three brothers and their uncle Rabindranath. And why did he design it? Because they are fashioning themselves as Pan-Asians. They're wearing dresses that are indistinguishable. They could be from Persia, they could be from Japan, like they could be from Tibet, etc. The figures are steeped in a contemplative melancholy which attunes them to a sphere of eternity. So they are all meditating figures. Abanindranath uses his invented Nastalic calligraphy for his signature in Bengali, in all these. Abanindranath thus assimilates the Persian text into an Indian Sufi world, addressing the viewer to relate to it as an aspect of the nation in the making. So he's bringing this also into the sphere, this Orientalistic take on a Persian text, instead of illustrating it either as a Persian text or as an Orientalist text. He's illustrating it as a national text, as an Indian text of a certain kind. Now, moving on, in the late 1920s, inspired by the transformation of characters in theater, so this is another, we talked about Kirtan. Abanindranath's paintings are negotiating with the world of performance throughout. There is always some kind of performative act, aspect to his paintings. And he himself later, of course, wrote Jatras. The Thakur Bari was always involved in plays. They were making these dramas, etc. And so he was participating in that. And he marveled at the transformation that people undergo when they act on a stage. They become somebody else. See? So, inspired by that transformation, he claimed to see a mask under the surface of human features. So he tells, this Mohanlal, whose face you're seeing over here, in his famous book, Jora Shakur, Dokkhiner Baranda, this Mohanlal Gangopadhyay notes the fact that Abanindranath said one day that as he looks at people, he can see a mask just under their face. And that what is that mask? It is not, it's not, what kind of mask is it? It's not the mask that one peels off or one wears during the day and takes off at night. It's a mask of potentia. It's a kind of a mask that, we internalize from the world, and that we, in a sense, are carrying with us all the time as a possibility of becoming. See? So he started painting people around him, family and members and friends, in a new way. He started doing these portraits, and these were the portraits. These were often considerably deviant with respect to the normal features of the person, and often evoked cultural resonances that were foreign to an Indian norm. He thus invited his subjects and viewers to stretch their imagination and embody alien possibilities that were present as potentials of their native individualities. I'm encountering a new world of diversity. The modern is a world in which I'm always encountering the unknown. And this unknown lives in me. And can I manifest that? To what extent does that become living for me? That becomes a practice of this type of encounter. He painted his favorite nephew, Mohanlal Gangopadhyay. That's what you see, for example, in an elongated Japanese facial type. And we'll see the next one where he's painted a female relative as a Central Asian type. Through these practices, he invoked a nation radically porous, willing to exceed given boundaries and become other. This is the kind of nation he's thinking about. Are we fixed to an identity, or are we open to becoming something else? This is the other one. This is the female relative and her sort of Central Asian looks. He also painted his own mask as a self-portrait. The deviance here indicates another aspect of the national subject, where he is not an anonymous subject, but a national subject, because he is a marked member of the nation, somebody who is quote-unquote famous. It has the character of a wooden mask at the edges. So you see the edges are just as if they're made of wood, with softer living features towards the center, taking on a contorted and pained expression. You see, it's as if something living is being turned to wood at the edges and is sort of doesn't know what to do about it, is pained about it. The message seems to be that nationalism stereotypes its gallery of famous people. He looks like a trophy that has been put on the wall, just like the paintings in galleries that are turned into dead objects who are abstracted to serve its narratives of history. We take the past and make it into an abstract tool by which we talk about the linear direction of a teleological history that will narrate the nation. The life is gradually drained from them, from these such people, as they are made to fit the molds of the narration. Abanindranath's message is to be aware of such processes and resist them. Now we move to the series that you will see and may have already seen in the gallery here, Arabian Nights. Around 1930, Abanindranath painted the Arabian Nights series. This was a return to the Islamic world, which, like his Omar Khayyam paintings, he again set in India, but now with a much thicker diversity of types. As with the Rubaiyat, many of the women in this series wear saris. Like here itself, of course, here you see the Muslim dress, but a lot of the women wear saris, then some of them wear these peshwajes, etc. While some wear the peshwaj or jama, men often wear costumes from various parts of the Islamic cosmopolis of the medieval ages. So you see, this is another thing it's an entire lesson, looking at his paintings, a lesson in cultural history. Each painting has got very well-informed costume identifications. They come from somewhere. You see that, you know, some place and some time. The paintings are topped with text. Now you can see the text on the top, just as in the case of the Krishna Leela paintings. But if you look at the text here, and this again, if you look at people who have written, they try to say that he is trying to illustrate, English translations, etc. As a matter of fact, he was looking at a pretty large range of Arabian Nights, including Persian versions. But these texts are neither in, of course, not in English, nor in Persian. They are in Hindustani. And they are so because the prime objects for his paintings are Bortola, what he called kechas, that he picked up. That these are Hindustani versions of the Arabian Nights that were produced in Bortola at that time. So these are texts written in Nastaliq calligraphy. Reading the text reveals it to be Hindustani, Hindi and Urdu hybrid, belonging to versions of the text the artist obtained from Bortola in Kolkata. The Arabian Nights is thus assimilated into the Indian nation, its urban citizen subjects being asked to see themselves as belonging to its diverse cosmopolis. This painting is one of the early paintings where Shahrzadi, her name is Shahrzadi, right, which means daughter of the city, Shahrzadi. She is talking to her father, the wazir, and asking him to lend her hand in marriage to the caliph. And her sister, Dunya Jadi, is standing underneath. As with the Mask series, it invites acts of imagination that make us transform ourselves through affective intercultural dialogue. Can we stretch ourselves through mimesis to become these people? They also, he's telling us, they also belong to your world. They don't belong to some distant world. But he's also saying that the distant world is here. This is a very important point, and that we see over here. We have flattened our world. Our modern world has become small. We seem to know everything about everybody because we read the same things, do the same things. It's a common world. But Abanindranath is trying to say that within our small, normal world, vast ranges of distance actually exist. And we have to use our imagination to re-establish that distance. Here, the prince, Qamar al-Zaman, so this Qamar al-Zaman's, there are two paintings. By the way, the paintings in the gallery are not arranged in sequence. So you'll have some difficulty. Whoever's done it has not done the proper sequencing. So there are two paintings of Qamar al-Zaman. The previous one shows him at a certain point at night after he has had this interesting kind of dream where some jinns have played a trick on him by bringing a Chinese princess to his bed and then taken her away. And he wakes up and he thinks he has had a dream, but he sees her ring over there, and then he imagines her. He dreams of her all the time. But what Abanindranath has done, he's made him into an artist. So he's on his bed with a painting of this princess. And that's what he dreams with the painting. And it sends him on this long journey, and this is the end of the journey. So this is the next thing, end of the journey. And you can see that it's a Rajput horseman that he has painted, who has taken this long journey and gone to China to meet the princess of China. Here, Prince Qamar al-Zaman is depicted as a Rajput prince who has traveled a long distance to the alien land of China to find the beloved he has seen as if in dream. The wash, costumes, and physical bearing of the two characters heighten the sense of the meeting of distant peripheries. There is a great distance that is created by these means. This is a sense of vastness and subjective distance we are asked to be receptive towards in our intersubjective relations as national subjects. Don't take each other for granted. We have vastly different cultural histories that coexist in this modern world as we live together in a nation. Now, this is a very famous painting, many times reproduced. It's also here. From the outset, as Abanindranath presents it, narration as storytelling is the central theme of the Arabian Nights. You see, that is, of course, that's what the Arabian Nights is about. It's about the power of storytelling. And that's what Abanindranath was really interested in. And as I said, all his work is close to the performative, but I think the performance that he thought was the most to his liking and the most powerful was storytelling. He was himself a storyteller, and that's what draws him to look at the series and make it into a trope for his nationalism. Nationalism for Abanindranath is a praxis of storytelling. Creative acts of narration at the level of intersubjective life are transformative and can overturn state dictates through the power of affect. The state puts down the law. And that's what this entire work, Arabian Nights, is about. It's about state law and about the fact that distrust enters as one of the guiding principles of state law that creates a lot of harm, a lot of violence to the citizens. But what happens is that the feminine is coded into it as the recipient of that violence. But the feminine is the one that overturns the dictates of the state through the power of storytelling. And in that sense, you can see the relations between colonizer and colonized being, coded into that model. And then later into the nation state and the people of the nation. See, they're all relations of that kind. So here this story is called The Hunchback and the Fishbone. See, again, I think here they've misnamed it Hunchback of Fishbone, but it's The Hunchback and the Fishbone. So you can see over here, in this world, here we are shown parallel, diverse worlds that seem oblivious of each other. This is an involved story. You can read it. Some of you must have read it. It's a story about a couple, a tailor couple, that picks up a hunchback in the evening, brings him home because they think they'll have some fun with him, and feed him some fish, and he chokes on a bone. And you can see in the central tableau, the tailor, you can recognize him by his sewing machine in the niche. Very interesting, because that's a sort of niche that in a masjid would be the niche for praying towards Makkah. Okay. So that in that niche is a little emblem of his god, which is the sewing machine. And the hunchback has choked on the bone. You can see underneath a little fish skeleton on a plate. He's finished that. And they're trying their best to revive him. The wife is thumping his back to see if he'll cough up the fish bone, which is actually at the end of the story, that's what happens. He does cough up the fish bone after people think he's long dead. And the man is trying his best to pull his legs, etc. And so that scene is going on. And then you can see these other worlds that seem to be totally oblivious of this, but are implicated in this event, because in the story, they will try to get rid of that body and take it successively to these other houses and have other people who encounter the so-called dead body and think that they have killed it. You see? So there you can see over here down at the bottom, there is somebody who's got some, not pots and pans, they look almost like alchemical things. He's probably the barber who will turn up right at the end. Here there is a merchant, and there is a merchant there with bags of rice, and there's, he thinks that there are rats, and there's a cat over here. So there's all kinds of references of the story that are in the details. But the really interesting part is that this is happening in Jorashanko. And you can see the so-called label, Kerr, Tagore and Company, which was Darkanath's company. And right up on top, you can see a room in which, on a long table, a nationalist with a topi, and with a pair of Britishers is having dinner. And the other thing which is really interesting is there's a pankha covering a painting in the back, but for those who know the references, this is a famous painting of Narrating Tagore. See? So this entire upper register is happening in Thakurbari, in 5 number Narrating Tagore Lane. So these are parallel worlds. At the same time, it is only at the highest level that one can see the Union Jack. You can see it flying over here. See? So these worlds that exist oblivious of who is really running the country, you see, it is only at the highest level that somebody is aware of it. The sign of the colonizer or of state power. At this level, the colonized is in an affective dialogue with the colonizer. So that's what's going on. And it's in Abanindranath's thinking, this is a storytelling world that is happening up there with the colonizer. An affective dialogue with the colonizer in a slippery interweaving of narratives aimed at inverting state control. See? So here there are two worlds, just like his Krishna Leela paintings are happening at two registers. Here our encounters with state power can happen at two registers. On one register, I'm actually controlled by the machinery of the state. At another level, I'm talking to people. And in talking to people, I'm actually re-narrativizing the nation in a way that can actually change the mechanics of the state. And that is the potential of the nation that Abanindranath sees. See, that's his nation is the nation of the people who carry out these kinds of practices to own the nation, to become the owners of the nation. This is the final painting, the most famous painting. This painting appears in Shiv Kumar's book. It also appears in my book cover. Sinbad the Sailor, he is the archetypal storyteller. So right in the beginning, we have the image of Shahrazadi telling stories to the Caliph. And in a sense, right at the end, we have this repetition of this trope of Sinbad telling stories to a little boy surrounded by these people who belong to the world of Arabian Nights, the extremely cosmopolitan world of Arabian Nights. He internalizes the far peripheries of the nation in the multivocality of his stories. So this is, for him, these people of that world reside right here in Kolkata. They belong to the nation and they belong to his locality. His audience is the awakening subject of the nation, a child, radically imaginative and open to newness. The colonizer or the representative of state power is also present. You can see him on a mora over here. He is offset. You can see these people very symmetrically arranged, but he is just a little oblique. He's offset. He's also at a height. He's sitting on a sofa. And so he's present, but he's present in a different way, not the same way as the others. Presented obliquely, he is always a threat who can take on the role of the ringmaster, controller of the narrative. He can immediately, at some point, change the nature of the narrative. He's another center of the whole thing, as it were. The master storyteller is aware of this, and his stories are a perpetual strategic negotiation between the nation state and the nation as a people in the making through acts of friendship, imagination, hospitality, and openness to the other. And so that is Abanindranath's nationalism and his nation in the making. Any time for questions, comments, anything?
To this, what should I say? To this greatness of this picture. Do you believe the ruling class, whoever they were Dhritarashtra, they played the role of Dhritarashtra till now. This is my first question. My second question, sir. My second question. Okay. Now the second question is quite identical. Okay.
Yeah. No, actually, I don't have an answer to your question because, we can't point at fingers. I mean, there's so many things that happen. As I said, nationalism is a matter of contested histories. So there's a lot of different views that are at play. And I see this as a certain point of time when certainly something emerged. I think one thing I can say, which is related to what you were saying, is that there's a charge to events of this kind that doesn't actually go. That's also partly what he's saying. That doesn't actually go. They form the virtual space of our existence. And even the fact that somebody today, after so many years, talks about it, or the painting is displayed, means that to some extent the forces that were there are appealing to people again. So what it will lead to, we don't know, but certainly, there are ways in which history produces events, and events produce energies that don't die so easily.
Let's proceed towards the gallery, and we'll continue our discussions there. I request you all to keep your tags ready, because they will be your entry ticket to the museum. The CISF, we'll have to show it to them.
It is Hindustani because these are it's almost as if he is the central man, not the ghost-like painting, apparition painting. This is sort of apparition painting. It's almost like an apparition. The contrast between law as we understand it and law as derived from storytelling. Law as persuasion from understanding story. Little edge like that. Again, like this painting and this painting. Yes, please.
So that we are a little more. Okay.
Brothers, the king and his brother, they leave their kingdom and they come across a larger ring with small rings. And she says, this is the number of people that have made love to me. And you just belong to my book of, innumerable lovers. And they of the princes of China. You see, as I was saying, this is, his name is there. You see, Zaman, the same person. And here he is with the painting that he has made to remember the stories like this. And they're actually told with the intent that distrust leads to disaster. And actually, then the story comes out that she never gave it to, that little children were playing and they stole it, and somebody confiscated it from them and gave it to his lover. Small vase with flowers. But these touches are just fantastic. Yeah, this is that Hindustani. Is that you can travel great distances, while here you can do the same thing with binoculars. And it's a comment on which he makes with Rabindranath's trips as well. Rabindranath used to travel along. Yeah. It's a goat, and then there's a dog and a hen. So one series of conversations takes place between the donkey and the